All right, so let me know. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening. This is Joshua Tumby, the Gamefather, also reporting for Meisan Otaku, and we're here to talk to Mark with, I always butcher the name of the company.
Dyskami Publishing.
Dyskami Publishing. So, Dave, why don't you tell us about what you guys have going on right now?
Yeah, so we're publishing kind of two different streams. The one we've done for a few years now is board games for Sailor Moon. So tabletop games, we have party games and different types of easier games. They're not heavy Euros. And then we also have another stream that we just recently announced that we're going to be relaunching, the Big Ice Small Mouth or Besem 4th edition. And we're going to be coming out with that later this year.
Okay, so my friends over at Meisan Otaku had some questions about the Besem because they were huge fans of 3rd edition, and they had, so let's look at some of their questions. Their first question was, why do you think now is the right time to be doing a 4th edition for Besem?
Well, that's a great question. It's interesting. Part of it is it's the right time because that's the time where I actually finally managed to acquire the license. So back in 2005, 2006 is when the previous company that I was working with, Guardians of Order, sold the property as it was going out of business, sold that property over to White Wolf. And since that time, given that that was what got me into the industry and I had created that game in 1997, I was very interested in relicensing it after a few years of cooling off period. Mm-hmm. And White Wolf had gone through several different ownership companies from Company A to Company B, and finally ended up with Paradox Entertainment. Mm-hmm. And there had been multiple times that I had made inquiries about the potential for licensing something for a role-playing game to do a new edition, because Besem 3rd didn't quite end where I wanted it to, and it was a bit of a letdown as I was exiting the industry. So finally, after it ended up with Paradox, and we had connected about a few things regarding PDFs, and then I just said, hey, might you consider licensing it to me for a 4th edition? And they said yes. So when that happens, you say, okay, now is the right time, because that's what it actually came through.
Because you actually got it back.
Yeah, precisely. Now that said, anime is very, very popular. It has a lot of streaming services with Crunchyroll and Funimation and Amazon Prime, and so it's in so many places right now. I think it's a really good time for a great, solid, universal system to come back with everything that has been learned about role-playing and concepts over the past, say 12 years since Besem was last out.
Okay, which leads into a couple of the next questions is, how will 4th edition be with compatibility to, say, older source material?
So a lot of the source material that we did, because Besem was never really super heavy, crunchy with exact measurements and miniature rules and everything. A lot of it was a lot of genre material and conceptual. So all of that is completely compatible, of course. The actual stats is different. This is probably, in terms of some of the numerical values, closer to 3rd edition, of course, because it follows on that. But there has been a substantial number of rewrites and rebalancing. So it wouldn't be exactly translatable. If you looked at 2nd edition expansion and supplements versus what ended up happening with 3rd edition, we expanded the game a lot in terms of the scope and the number of options and abilities available. And so something that came out for 2nd edition, the numbers would be very, very different. 3rd edition only had the core rulebook and never went past there. So it was probably closer to 3rd, but there's no direct compatibility. I would say it'd be nice to maintain that, but we couldn't have made Besem as good of a 4th game as we needed to if we tried to maintain any sort of real compatibility. But it's all going to be familiar. People back from 1st edition Besem are going to recognize a lot of the elements that we have. Okay. It's not a radically different system. It's just a refined and improved system.
Okay. What can we expect? More consistent Besem materials and promotion going forward, and to move past the forgotten system status that Besem seems to have gotten.
Yeah, that's the goal, of course. We're going to be launching a Kickstarter in July, and that will in some way set the tone or the pace going forward. Mm-hmm. If it is met with lukewarm or moderate availability, and people have said, well, it's nice and let's do it, but it doesn't really expand out the fan base on that, then we will take cues from that and be more moderate in what we release. Okay. Meanwhile, of course, if it's quite successful and the interest is quite high, then it makes more sense to put a little bit more time and money into ramping up production. We've sketched out several years of expansion material, source material, the relaunching of the core line as well as supplementary products on that. And so I kind of know where I'd like to take the direction of it, but in the end it will determine obviously demand. There's no sense producing things if no one's really interested in it.
Exactly. Okay, so why go the Kickstarter route this time around? Because I know with like Crystal Dice, you guys did your own internal crowdfunding more or less, pre-order type system, whereas this one you're doing the actual Kickstarter. Is there a reason why you went that route?
There is. I'm a big supporter of Kickstarter as a concept. Back when I had run my previous company, everything, you might be able to get a few pre-orders in, but that concept didn't happen. And so smaller companies like Dyskami have to raise all the capital ourselves, front everything, and then you print X number of copies and you hope that you can make your money back and sell through. Obviously you'd love to have a success, but more higher risk factor, and you don't really know what type of exposure you should be giving to a particular product. So with Kickstarter, it allows to, first of all, raise some capital in advance and also do things that the fan would like. So with stretch goals, with feedback that you're getting, it's allowed to structure what the product is going to be. For Sailor Moon, we obviously have an approval process. It's licensed through Toei Animation, and things get a little more complex when you're dealing with licensed companies. And so the Kickstarter route was not appropriate for what we're doing with Sailor Moon, but with Big Eyes Small Mouth, because it has been since 2006, since the last product came out, and when you're going 13 years with nothing, no support, no additions, and I was out of the industry for a while, it's difficult for me to say what is the demand for it. It could be that there's a massive demand, or it could be that there's very little demand. Obviously, I think that there's enough demand that people would like to see more.
I would agree with that, seeing that I got pulled in by my friends like, hey, check out Bessem 3rd edition. I'm like, okay, well this is nice, but this is it? There's not more?
Right, and it was disappointing that White Wolf never went with it.
6 years after the initial thing.
Oh, right,
Back when the PDFs were floating around the internet. And
yes,
like,
of course.
It's like, this is so good, why? But I get why. So that, it makes sense. Sounds good. So I think you've covered a lot of what we needed for Bessem. What about with the Sailor Moon, and are there any other projects that you guys are working on?
Yeah, so we're focused really on the Sailor Moon tabletop side and the Big Eyes Small Mouth role-playing side. That's not to say there's not other projects we have on the go. There's a couple of things that are anime-related, a couple of things non-anime-related that have been a little parked on the side. I'm always thinking of conceptual, even if I'm not going to be the one doing the game design, I'm always thinking about what would be good for the industry, what would be good for the company, what might people like, and where these go and when they come out will determine obviously a number of things. We're going to keep the company small. There's no kind of aspirational goals to ramp up and be a very large company. We're on a mid-sized company with Guardians of Order. Quality over quantity, and when you're dealing with a company that gets large and you're starting to have in the $250,000 in salaries annually or even more, that puts a different strain and a different stress on it. I have always looked at the relaunch of Dyskami as something as a part-time capacity, not this is my full-time job. Some people may know I'm a politician, I'm on city council in my city, and that's kind of where one of my focuses are. So this is a great opportunity to work with some freelancers and some other people in different capacities to help me kind of bring a game that I think is good for the industry and is going to be good for fans that are looking for a nice, solid, universal system. We're obviously not the only game out there that does it, but I think that there's a niche for what Bessem is. Before I decided to relaunch the game, although obviously the license was an important timing, I also want to make sure I kind of scan the social media crowds, and within minutes of searching it, there was people that had posted about Big Eyes Small Mouth, about the memories of it, whether it's 2nd edition, 1st edition, 3rd edition. So I know that people are still thinking about the game, and even though it's been so long afterwards, that seemed to be a good opportunity to bring something forward in a new format.
I agree, because I remember when you announced it, all those threads just went crazy with people talking about the old Bessem, wondering how the compatibility and all that kind of stuff. It's like there is an interest for it.
I think so. I think there is a demand. I think while the anime crowd or the anime status in North America isn't the same as it was 15 years ago, it's a very different feel. It wasn't nearly as mainstream as it is now. There was no Netflix.
Right.
I mean, they're rented DVDs back then, but there was no streaming Netflix with anime, there was no Crunchyroll, and that has changed the dynamics. At the same time, there's a lot more anime, more mainstream
More
on
genres.
standard cable back then. So you got the Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon and Digimon and Pokemon, and a lot of that has moved away into more cable or streaming systems.
Sure.
And so it's a different feel, but I think it's still great. There's always going to be people that want to role play their favorite anime shows or within an anime type world.
Create their own world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the resurgence of the top games in role playing, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is at the height of D&D right now, which is wonderful. Pathfinder kind of picked up where 3.5 kind of didn't do quite as well as it went into 4, and Pathfinder kind of had a resurgence, but also White Wolf is doing a lot with the relaunches of Vampire and their partners to do the World of Darkness type series. Green Ronin is doing some great stuff with their games. And so there really seems to be the right time for an appropriately sized product, and that's what we're going for with Bessem.
Sounds good. So, and you said I don't think you actually mentioned Kickstarter starting July 2nd?
That's right, July 2nd is when we start the Kickstarter. It'll run for approximately a month, and we'll see how that goes. We know anytime you do a Kickstarter, you have to plan out stretch goals. You have to plan out where the product could go, given that you have no clue where it's actually going to end up. So we have a number of different products planned. I've planned out the line for several years. Obviously, there's room for flexibility. Should a license become available, should additional products come up because I interact with certain writers and they say, hey, I got this great idea, then it can fit into a certain pitch. But July 2nd is when it starts. Then the book is mostly done, but we have to finish it still, and we're waiting for some of the cues from Kickstarter to know how we should be finishing it up. And then it will be out in backers' hands by the end of the year, and then probably early February in retail is kind of the plan.
Okay.
And then 2020.
You mentioned licenses. Are you planning on doing like licensed source books in the future, or just generics, genre, or?
Yeah, well, certainly for the Big Ice line, we have a multiverse setting that we would like to explore, not in the sense of if it's integrally tied to Big Ice Smallmouth, but it serves as an example. So there could be a world that is a high fantasy world, and we express the genre of high fantasy through the application of a setting that we have for the Bessa multiverse. But primarily it's a high fantasy type expansion or source book, and so that's kind of the goal that we're going to have with that structure.
Okay.
But we never know about licensing. I mean, Sailor Moon, whenever I went back into Dyskami, it was always, the Sailor Moon was kind of the holy grail for me. It's one of the big licenses that got me started back in '98 after Big Ice Smallmouth first edition came out in '97, and it's something that I always have an incredible love for Sailor Moon. But there's a lot of great anime shows out there, whether they're older retro ones or newer ones, and there may be opportunities to do some licensed RPG products from it. I can take what I've learned with Guardians of Order and what worked and what didn't work, and then kind of move forward with that. In addition, although it was downplayed in the initial announcement, so we also licensed Silver Age Sentinels, which was the companion product to Big Ice Smallmouth. That was a superhero RPG, and that was part of the licensing deal. And so we are going to be relaunching a little bit down the road a new superhero RPG using the system that is kind of created with Bessem with the Tri-Stat system. And so that's another thing we kind of have on the books. It's a lot if we're going to stay small, and so we want to make sure we appropriately size what we're doing. Don't try to bite off more than we can chew or more we can handle, and make sure we run the company as effectively and efficiently as possible.
Okay. I want to thank you for your time. This was a great interview. This is Joshua Tummery, the Gamefather. I just want to say thank you for joining us today, and I hope you found this information very useful. Thank you.
Thanks very much.